Rich, how can my real estate photography business grow and stay on the cutting edge?
I'm glad you brought that up, Brian. By including hdphotohub.com. You just upload your photos and your clients will get a property website, social media flyers, and videos, all automatically.
Wow, that seems pretty easy. What do I do to get started?
It is easy, and all you have to do is register today at hdphotohub.com. And if you're using the referral code Shooting Spaces, you get your first property marketing kit absolutely free.
Free?
Yeah, free. HD Photo Hub is where great photos become a powerful marketing kit. Again, that's hdphotohub.com.
This is Shooting Spaces with Rich Baum and Brian Berkowitz.
Hello and welcome to this wonderful episode. I am Brian and I have my partner over here, Rich.
Yeah, hey, what's up, Brian?
How's it going? And thank you all for tuning in. But before we get into it, as we normally do, Rich, what's going on over there in California?
Busy, busy, busy. Everybody's busy. I actually had an agent that I can't do because I'm doing my workshop next week, and I said I'm got an imperative thing I can't not do, and I called everybody I knew, and nobody could do it. So she actually ended up changing her schedule for it to fit. So it's busy, busy, busy.
Awesome. That's good to hear. And you got the workshop. I mean, by the time I guess this airs, your workshop probably would have happened.
It was a great workshop, I'm sure.
But you have a full house, right?
Full +1, yeah. It's really awesome, and it's just a great opportunity. I've done this workshop at this house. This is my fourth one at this house, and it's been great. I've been so happy with it. Wonderful house, and a great opportunity to learn. And I'm just going through my syllabus and my I always try and make the workshop a little better each time. So all really excited.
Awesome. So let's get right into it because we have a ton to talk about today with our guest. I want to introduce Brooke Holm, who's, I guess, an interior photographer in design and architectural is her specialty. Hi, Brooke. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And before we start, why don't you just give all our listeners your website URL or any social handles, so in case they're listening at their computer and they want to just take a look at some of your work, they can follow along.
Yeah, sure. My website is brookeholm.com, Brooke with an E and Holm without an E. And then Instagram, same thing, at Brooke Holm.
All right, cool. So thanks for coming on the show. I came across some of your work on Mike Kelly's new blog, and I figured I'd reach out to you as a good guest to have on the show. But before we, I guess, talk a little bit about photography, just why don't you give us a quick condensed version of your backstory? Because I know you're American by way of Australia. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I was born in California, but I moved to Australia when I was 9 years old with my mom and my sisters. And I pretty much grew up in Australia. I spent 20 years there ever since I was 9. So while I was there, I didn't really get into photography until I sort of finished university. I chose something off a list because I didn't really know what I wanted to do at 17. So yeah, when I finished that, and it was kind of like a TV advertising degree, so fairly vague, didn't really give me any skills. But I started working in an ad agency, and then from there, they sort of thrust this camera in my hand one day and said, "Hey, go out and take some pictures of these billboards we made because we need to put them in some kind of presentation." So I did that. I brought them back. They were in focus, which was like the main brief. And they really loved them, and they decided to keep getting me to do that. So yeah, I basically just kept shooting for them. I got really interested in photography, and I got so interested that I decided to study part-time while I was working, and that was just like a photo imaging course. So it was photography, it was design, and by the time I finished that, I was sort of ready to be like, okay, I'm a real photographer now. And from there, I moved to Melbourne, and then my sort of photography career took a snowball and organically sort of became a freelance thing. Never had to work for anyone again, and I got my own clients. It was a word of mouth. And sort of 6 years later, here I am. I live in New York, and yeah, it's long story short. I sort of just fell into it by happy accident.
So you started your career there back in Australia, is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I started it in Melbourne because once I realized I wanted to do photography, I kind of realized that Brisbane was a little bit limited. So I moved to Melbourne and really got things going for myself within a pretty short amount of time. So I was pretty fortunate that way.
Interesting. And what was that transition like? I mean, I guess you weren't there long enough, but you started your career in Australia and then coming to New York. And, I'm in New York also, so I know how hard and how competitive it is out here. Transitioning to New York and I guess starting from scratch again, ultimately.
Yeah, it was interesting. I guess coming to New York, it's always sort of been a place that I was interested in. I would visit here with my family and my sisters, and we'd run around the city. And I was like, I can imagine myself living here because I just get this vibe. Everybody's doing stuff. Everyone's running around, like, I don't know, seeming like busy and important. And I'm like,
move out of my way.
I could see myself walking fast on the streets alongside you people.
With your wallet in your front pocket.
Okay. Yeah, wallet in my front pocket.
It's not 1985, Rich.
And you don't look anybody in the eye.
That's definitely true, except I sneak a peek every now and then.
Well, there's so much oddities in the streets of New York, you have to kind of look.
Yeah, you kind of have to look, and I think that everybody knows that if you're looking, you're just observing, and then you will quickly go on your merry way. So yeah, it's not so bad here. But it was interesting restarting my career, and now that I had to fully restart, I came here with a pretty hefty portfolio. I'm lucky to have a fiance who is a graphic designer, so he designed me this big book. And I basically spent my first month emailing hundreds of people just saying, hey, can I come meet you? This is my work. I'd love to work for you. And admire what you do, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, in the beginning, it was like getting one email back here and there. But gradually.
Out of how many? I mean,
maybe one out of maybe not 100, maybe 1 out of 20.
Wow.
But I mean, in saying that, maybe it took a little bit for people to get back to me, but my first job here was for the New York Times.
Oh, that's impressive.
Yeah. So, and that was kind of through connection, actually. So okay. I realized that it does actually make a difference if you know someone that knows someone that knows someone.
Definitely.
But yeah, it took me a while to sort of gather momentum.
And what did you do for the newspaper?
I shot a story. I shot a bar story about Bemelman's Bar in the Upper East Side. And it was just a story on cocktails. And some amazing writer had written a story, and they just needed a photo to accompany it. So I lugged my little lighting kit up to the Upper East Side, and that was my first gig.
Well, it's a great first gig, especially in the hospitality side of things, because New York has no shortage of hospitality spaces to shoot between bars, restaurants, and hotels. So yeah,
that is for sure.
I'm sorry, you can go ahead, Rich.
Let me ask, while we're on that subject, though, I'd like to know, were you like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And were you nervous that you would, that you wanted to make sure that you would succeed? And is there something you can tell people that are just kind of going, oh, that's exactly what I want to do? But how did it feel? And a little bit more on that first gig.
Yeah, it was. I was maybe not scared. I was more frustrated because I had moved to Melbourne on my own once before and sort of started a career without having a portfolio. So it's almost like I had done it before, but this time I had more to show for myself. So it wasn't easy, but I think that perseverance, keep emailing people that have sort of said, yeah, love your work. Let's get you in a couple of weeks' time. Hit me up then. I would definitely follow up because if I didn't, they definitely wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And just trying to have as many face-to-face meetings as possible, because I think it is really nice for someone to see I had like a physical printed book, and people were kind of impressed that I had that, because they're like, oh, people usually just bring an iPad and whatever. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think it was also almost like an old school way of showing a book to an agency. And I think people were like, oh, cool. So I don't know if that necessarily helped, but yeah, I think it was a good talking point to start with when I was actually having meetings with these people.
I think it does I think it does make a difference, the book. I have one too, and I've brought it on some meetings, and some meetings I don't. And the reaction you get from seeing, my book's an 11 by 17, so it's a big book, and the reaction you get when they're, flipping through the book is priceless compared to just, digital photos on the iPad. So.
Yeah, for sure. The only thing is that it is, it needs updating more frequently. So I very, very quickly realized that after I started shooting, that it was outdated already, and I was like, oh crap.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is great having that.
Well, the book I have, actually, it's funny. It has like screw inside, so you can actually just print new prints and unscrew.
Mine had a binder, which is sort of similar thing. You could take out pages and everything, but I also had mine printed in Australia, and their specs are all kinds of different to the States, and centimeters, inches, all of that metric kind of stuff. So yeah, I figured out that I'd have to reprint the whole thing if I was to get extra pages printed here.
Cool. I know you mentioned when you started that first gig for the paper on the bar, you took your stuff and you took your light kit and you headed uptown. So, I'm looking through your work here, and I invite anybody that has not seen it to take a look at Brooke's website. Your work has a very natural light feel to it. And I know you mentioned you bring a lighting kit. So do you light your work, your images, or do you try to go for more natural light? What's your approach as far as shooting?
So it depends what I'm shooting. For interiors, 99% of the time I'm using natural light.
Okay.
And then I will use natural light, obviously, for outside stuff, but for still life, and that New York Times story in particular, always using lights for those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but usually a pretty natural kind of lighting setup still, even though it is strobe lights. But yeah, for interiors, it's mostly natural.
Your work is extraordinary. I'm just looking at your website, and as always, I encourage anybody out there that has the opportunity, check out Brooke's website, because it will not only be inspired, but you'll have all these questions and want to know how this was done or that was done. Just wonderful.
Thank you.
So one thing, when Rich and I were going over your work earlier, we definitely noticed, and Rich specifically pointed this out to me, is about your composition. And I know Rich wanted to go into it a little bit and ask about that. Rich, do you have specific questions you wanted to cover, or?
Yeah, because I'm kind of slightly in a transition phase myself, trying to go much more into design. And I don't know if I want to say architectural photography, but I certainly have been thinking more of things I hadn't thought about before, and such as composition, camera height. I have been talking to a few really accomplished, besides Brian, but a few other really accomplished interiors photographers that are just magical. And they've really helped me thinking of things I hadn't thought about. So I'm looking at your compositions, and I mean, okay, your subjects are magnificent. Everything you're in your website is just the most beautiful and interesting spaces, and that's what we're doing here, shooting spaces. But I just like to know, is there something you can say for me and other photographers that are trying to learn, because you don't know what you don't know. What can you tell me to help me with my compositions? Like, look at other photographers I admire their work, look at this or look at that. What can you say to help with compositions?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a start to look at people's work that you like and sort of analyze it and figure out why you like it, really pick it apart. And yeah, I mean, subject matter is a whole thing that's sort of outside your control a lot of the time. But it does 100% help that the spaces that you're shooting are beautiful. Sometimes they're not, and sometimes you have to polish a number 2. But I think
that's the best one. I can remember that. Polish a number 2. Okay. Clean and funny.
I don't know the age limit here. I think that for me, composition is, it's kind of a feeling, and I go into it just having a feeling that this particular angle looks best to me, and this is what's working within my frame. This is what's working with the lens choices that I have. And a lot of the time when I was first starting, I didn't have the lenses that I needed. I didn't have the lenses that I wanted, but I was making do with the very, very basics. But for me, I think when I approach an interior, the first thing I look at is, can I get this shot as a straight on versus a corner or an angle? And if I can, I sort of always go for that first, just because I think it's really, I don't know why. It just appeals to me
classic,
a little more.
Maybe it's single point's just such a classic shot if you can get it.
Yeah, if you can get it, for sure. Yeah. So I try that first. If that doesn't work, I try something else. But I always feel that when I'm looking back through the images later, I will always gravitate towards those straight-ons. And like, obviously with interior and architecture photography, my lines, my straight lines are vital, and just having everything straight and perfect. And I mean, to the millimeter. So yeah. And then also if things are like white walls, just making sure those are really crispy. And I feel like there's a lot of retouching that comes into play as well with interiors, because sometimes you don't have as much control over the light as you would like. You can't turn things off, turn things on. In terms of, I don't know, if you have big windows, sometimes you can't cover them. Whatever it is, there's always some obstacle to face. And I feel like it's all about troubleshooting sort of while you're on the spot. But yeah, I think the retouching of the interiors is definitely like something I'm thinking about subconsciously. It's like, can I fix this? And if so, how do I shoot it so that it's best for me to deal with later? If that makes sense.
It sounds like you do your own. Do you do all your own retouching? Editing?
I do. I try to, for interiors and architecture. I feel like the retouching there is very personal, and it's really up to your specific taste as to how you want it to look, because you can really make it look quite different. Like 2 people will take the same photo and then retouch it themselves, but they're not going to look the same by any means. And I think that for still life and when I'm lighting with strobes, that I usually pass on to a retoucher. But for interiors, I will always give it my first pass. And then if someone wants like an air conditioning unit retouched out, or like bigger things that aren't about aesthetics, then that's what they can do. But I have to get the light to feel right, and I have to get the shadow and contrast and highlights all working how I see them. So yeah, that I don't pass on to somebody else, because I would just tell them. It would take me longer to tell them than it would take me to do it myself.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree also. When I do real estate work in the busy season, I pass a lot of that off. But my design work, I've tried other retouchers, and I end up having to go back and do most of the work over myself. And I just found that it's just at that point not worth it. I might as well set some time aside and just make sure I can go in and get it done the way I want it to look.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But let me ask you a question back to your composition. When you're approaching a space to shoot, do you have like a lens preference that you like to start with and say, all right, this is what I like to do. Let me see if I can get the shot I need with this lens before I switch. I mean, when I shoot, what I like to do when I shoot like a design shoot is I take my 24 millimeter tilt shift, and I'll throw on I'm Canon, so I'll throw on a 2x extender on it, which gives me like a 48. And I always try to see if I can get the shot that I'm looking for with that lens combination. For some reason, that's always my approach, and I try to do it that way. What's kind of your approach, or do you kind of like see it and just say, all right, I think this lens will work, and throw on a 24 and just go?
Well, I have always actually gravitated to, wherever possible, actually using the longest lens possible. So I used to start, if I have the space, I will probably try with a 50, then move to a 35. And then if I'm desperate, move to a 24.
Okay.
And that's just because I shoot probably more with an editorial style where I'm looking for vignettes, or I'm looking for smaller moments within a gigantic space. A lot of the time, the magazines I was shooting for, they don't necessarily want what the exact overall picture looks like, but they want more of a feeling about the space. And so I sort of cut my teeth shooting like that. And it's funny, actually, like I've never owned a tilt shift and I've never used one to photograph an interior. And I actually, Mike Kelly, he and a couple other people that I met were like, "What? You've never shot with a tilt shift? Like, how do you get your images like that?" I'm like, "I don't know." I've never actually have done it, but I see the appeal of it for sure. And I think that it will be something I will add to my kit, but I've never really needed it to begin with.
Well, we were talking with another very talented interiors photographer, and he surprised us, or at least me, by saying he doesn't use tilt shifts either. And I was and it actually started me thinking that one thing I've done is consciously I don't bring my camera up higher than I need to have it because of the perspective distortion issues. But I've looked at his work and other people's work, because I'm looking at your work, and I think it's just I can totally see doing it. And I think that it's so funny. We all start without tilt shifts. A lot of us now are going to tilt shifts, and maybe the idea is to go out of tilt shifts. Maybe that's the problem. I'm using tilt shifts. But and I want to say that I'm looking again at your work. You have some just marvelous shadows. Oh my gosh. You just got, and it's so moody at the work, inappropriately moody, but it's just really, really great. I just can't get over it. Yeah.
So, Brooke, one thing I wanted to talk about, and because we haven't, I think we're like, 65 or 70 episodes in, and we haven't really touched on this in any of our previous episodes. So, and that is essentially about personal projects. And I know that's how you initially met Mike. So, before we go into the importance of personal projects, what's the backstory there? You met Mike on a NASA project, is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, so NASA did a call out for photographers to basically apply so that we could go and photograph inside their rocket building facility in New Orleans. And I saw the call out and I was like, I gotta try this, but there's no way that they're gonna choose me. But I applied for it, and really all you had to do is I actually don't remember. I'm pretty sure they just said, "Why do you want to shoot here? And also, what's your Instagram or what's your website?" And then they sort of just go off that. So anyway, much to my surprise, they chose me. And then they chose, I think, 12 photographers all up. And some people were photographers, some people were vloggers or video people. And yeah, they had us there for 2 days and basically toured us around the facility and said, have at it, except don't photograph wiring because China will try and steal our ideas. And other space agencies that want all the wiring details, they like to stay away from that. Yeah, so anyway, I met Mike there, and the two of us were like, "Hey, I know you," and he's like, "Yeah, I know you," and we follow each other on the old Instagram. So yeah, we kind of just ran around that place together shooting stuff and sort of kept in touch ever since.
All right, cool. And I know specifically, Mike talks about this often with all his aviation stuff, but, why don't you talk a little bit about, I don't know if you do any other personal projects, the importance of doing personal projects like this, not only for your own personal life and your psyche, but also just for your work.
Yeah, so I've been shooting personal work since I started photography, just because I guess in the beginning, when you don't know what you want to shoot, but you know that you want to shoot, you shoot everything. So I was shooting my sisters and making them dress up. And maybe I want to do fashion. Or I shot interiors, and I shot I shot everything. I shot weddings, I shot people, and I sort of just figured out that what I really loved doing was nature and landscapes. And then besides that, the interiors and the still life really sort of like took me as well. So those three things are kind of what I do. But with the landscapes, it's always self-initiated. It's always what I want to shoot versus responding to a client's brief. So I started shooting landscapes, and something about it really just captivated me. And I think that I've had a strong connection with nature ever since I was little. I was always out in the mud playing forts and tree houses and all kinds of stuff. I was, as you used to say, tomboy. And I was always in a tree. And I just think that I've really loved being outside ever since I was little. So for some reason, that has translated into my adult life, where every time I need to escape from the city, it's because I'm craving nature or craving like that disconnected feeling of not being around a lot of people and a lot of built up environment.
Come out to Long Island.
Yeah. One day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've sort of, since a trip to the Arctic in 2015, which was just a self-initiated expedition on a really small boat of 12 people up in the Arctic Circle. I think ever since then, I've sort of focused my personal work on photographing places that have a significance within the global context of climate change, and finding places that tell a story about it, whether it's under threat from climate change, whether it's a leader within the climate change discussion, whether it's just discovering why people connect with nature and what we sort of do to each other, how we affect each other. And what, I mean, almost just like questioning myself, like, what is this fascination that I have with nature and why is it important? So these are all things I'm thinking about when I'm shooting my personal projects and having exhibitions and showing this work. It's a connection of mine that I have to nature that I want to share with other people. And so I guess without going on for too much longer, that's the basic gist of sort of why I'm doing it. Yeah.
And have you noticed it has helped your professional work or your paid work, if you want to call it that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's helped. I feel maybe it's brought people to notice the other work that I do, because a lot of people notice the landscape work first. They may have seen it somewhere hanging. One of their friends might have bought a piece. I don't know. For whatever reason, they come to me and they're like, I love your landscapes. Also, I'm an architect and I want you to shoot the space. And I see you also do architecture and interiors. And yeah, I think having the different avenues of photography, they sort of lead to each other again. Yeah.
Cool. Let me shift gears a little. One thing we always like to talk to people about a little bit is the gear. I mean, are you a Canon, Nikon, Sony? What kind of gear do you use?
So I started mostly as a Nikon girl. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I didn't ever see a real difference in image quality between Nikon and Canon, but I felt like the way the Nikon felt in my hands, I liked better. And that was kind of the only reason I really stuck with them in the beginning. And I guess once you build like an arsenal of lenses, it's really hard to switch over. But yeah, I've been super happy with that. But I also, once I sort of had my career rolling, I was offered to be a ambassador for Mamiya. And so they gave me this epic discount on a medium format camera, 60 megapixel, which changed my life. And that is what I ended up shooting most things with. Apart from interiors and architecture, I will sometimes shoot with the phase, but I don't always feel like it's necessary depending on the output of it. So what I meant to say was the Mamiya was taken over by phase one. And so now with the upgrade, I now have a phase 1 that I shoot with, and I try to shoot most of the stuff that I'm doing landscape wise on that, because I'm trying to blow these prints up enormously big for print reproduction. So quality is key. And yeah, still life I'll always shoot with a phase, and interiors I just sort of back and forth depending on how much space I have, because I only have a lens so wide for the phase 1 too. Yeah.
And you shoot a combination of both residential and commercial or retail space? Because I see you have you have a lot of residential. Well, the majority of your stuff looks like it's residential on your website, but you also have, a restaurant and eyeglasses shop. So you just do a combination of things.
Yeah, a combination. I guess in Australia, it was maybe more residential because there was a lot of new builds. And, but in saying that, a lot of those architects did do restaurants. They did do cafes, shops, whatever. So yeah, it's kind of always been a little bit of a mix, actually.
All right, cool. Yeah. So
I wanted to ask, before we wrap it up, I noticed you have agencies that you are involved with, commercial inquiries and fine art, licensing and representation. Tell us, if you can, just a little bit about how that came about, and how does one get to a point when they need representation?
Yeah, I felt like when I moved to New York, I never had representation before I moved to New York 2.5 years ago. And I felt like here, where it was a little bit more of a bigger pool of fish, that it would potentially be very beneficial to have an agent. And I didn't really know how to go about getting one, because I'd never had one before. But with my licensing agent, that was maybe a little bit easier, because all I did was send through my portfolio and said, "Hi, would you like to represent me?" And they said, "We're having a meeting in a week, we'll let you know." And then they came back and said yes. So that was fairly pain-free. But with my agents for commercial work, they found me, and they found me through an agency that I had done work with before. And I had emailed a bunch of agents for commercial representation when I moved to New York, just to sort of see if I could get the ball rolling. But I actually did have trouble even getting responses from a lot of people. So whether they're just too busy, whatever, it seemed a little bit daunting. And also I was going for agencies that were representing people that I really admired. And who knows? I don't know how they find their photographers, but the ones that found me were amazing, and they were recommended to me through somebody that I knew. So I think I kind of lucked out with them. But I would say that had I not gone with them, I would have just continued emailing a bunch of agencies until finally someone would give me a meeting.
It's great.
And does majority of your work come through the agency now at this point?
Yeah, for all the commercial work, definitely. And it is really great having that sort of team behind you, just to help you with things that we all probably don't like quoting, like negotiating, like contracts, all of that fun stuff that I was dealing with before is almost like a big weight off, having someone that is more experienced in those areas, having your back.
Being the son of a famous theatrical agent, I was always aware of agencies, and I don't know if I will ever be in the position to need an agent, but it sure is exciting to think about, and I just think it's great for you. I'm excited to see what I'm going to start following you on Instagram now and see where you're going and what you're doing. And personal projects are something I'm going to plan on doing now that I have a little more free time coming up. And no, it's great. Thank you for coming
I highly recommend the personal projects. They really keep you grounded in a way. If you're doing things for yourself and doing things for others, you'll always be satisfied on both ends.
Well, I've been to 6 continents in the last 5 years, but it was family vacations, and though I am partially working, but it was family time. But in the next few years, now that my kids are in college, I'll definitely be doing something like that. So I look forward to it. And I only have one more continent to go to, and that's Antarctica. So we'll see. Maybe
me too. Maybe I'll see you there.
Sounds great. Good.
All right. Well, thank you, Brooke. We want to thank you for coming on the show. It was definitely enlightening. And like I said prior, everybody please go check out Brooke's work, BrookeHolm.com. And we'll put a link to her website in the show notes so everyone can check it out, and a link to your Instagram as well. But we want to thank you for coming on. And we definitely learned a little bit about some things that I guess we haven't really discussed yet on this show, which is, commercial agencies and personal projects and stuff like that. So we always like to bring some new ideas to our listeners. So thanks for coming on. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
And I'm surely going to go, within the next month, I'm going to have on my way to making a book. So that's going to be
amazing.
Do that. Yeah.
Yeah. You'll have to send me a copy.
Excellent. I shall. Thank you. Wonderful. Awesome. What a great time. Thanks, Brian, for having Brooke come on.
Sure. And Rich, do you want to take us out?
Yeah, sure. I'll just say thanks for joining us on our podcast and subscribing, hopefully. And we have our shootingspaces.net, our blog-ish place where we have a lot of information. And please, subscribe and ask the guys. Brian, tell us about Ask the Guys.
Ask the Guys, yes. If you guys have any questions, you know the deal. Submit them through our website, and we will dedicate some episodes to answering some of your questions. And those questions that we can't answer, we'll hopefully try to bring on a professional that can help us answer them.
Yeah,
so pretty straightforward. And the Twilight Webinar, for those of you who don't know, the Twilight Webinar couple of weeks back was a huge success. And if you missed it and you're interested in rewatching it, it's about an hour and 45 minutes of Rich and Matthew talking Twilight photography and teaching their editing. You can go to our website and you can purchase it and rewatch it through our website. Just go to shootingspaces.net, click on the Learn button, and you will see it, and you're able to get it that way. So, and that's it.
Okay.
Rich, until next time.
Until next time, go out there and shoot some spaces.
This episode of Shooting Spaces has been brought to you by hdphotohub.com. Helping your real estate photography business grow and stay on the cutting edge. Just upload your photos and your clients will get a property website, social media flyers, and videos, all automatically. Register today at hdphotohub.com using referral code SHOOTINGSPACES, and you get your first property marketing kit absolutely free. HD Photo Hub is where great photos become a powerful marketing kit. Again, that's hdphotohub.com.
This has been Shooting Spaces. For more episodes, visit shootingspacespodcast.com and visit our education site at shootingspaces.net.